Hey guys, welcome to another video. My name is Ian, I'm Ian the Reader, and today we have Box Talks episode 3. So if you're new to the channel or you just missed the other episodes, in this series on my channel, I talk about Book of the Month, which is an amazing book subscription box, which is monthly and it's pretty affordable. It's only $14.99, and essentially you, as a subscriber, every month have the option to order a book box. You may select from 5 of the picks for the month that the Book of the Month staff select. They're all new releases or upcoming releases, and they're all very good. And yeah, it's really great, really affordable. There are a lot of great options because they're all from different genres. You can get add-ons, you can do more books if you want to. It's just a really wonderful subscription box, and it's also a really great deal. Like I said, it's $14.99 a month, or you can use my referral link in the description to get your first box for cheaper, so that's nice. But anyway, in this Box Talks episode, I will be bringing you my January predictions for what books I think will be in the January Book of the Month box. Now, I did this for the first time last month for the December Book of the Month predictions, and it was definitely kind of like a trial run because I had never done it before, and I really wanted to just kind of see what people liked or see what people didn't. And so I've decided going forward that I'm going to pick 3 books for each genre, and then I'm also going to list some honorable mentions in the description of the video because I don't want this to be too long. I don't want to waste your time. I don't want to bore you. I want to give you a really fine-tuned selection of books that I think could be in the Book of the Month box. And then if you're just looking for more books in different genres, you can definitely check out the description below because I have researched a lot of books that are coming out in January or early February or late December that I think could be featured. But these that I'm going to be actually discussing in the video are like the ones that I really do think have a good shot of being in the Book of the Month box. And guys, it was hard this month narrowing down my selections. Like thrillers alone, there were like 14 books that I thought could be in the Book of the Month box. So if you're looking for a new read or a new book, like it is a great time to be getting into some new fiction because there are so many amazing books coming out in January and February and late December. And yeah, it took me forever to narrow down which ones I really thought were going to be the good ones, but I've done the best I could. So if you guys have any more suggestions or feedback, please do leave a comment on this video and let me know what you think. In addition to that, make sure you like, subscribe, hit that notification bell so you don't miss any videos. I post videos every Tuesday and Friday and sometimes on other days as well. I have more Book of the Month content coming, some end of the year lists and rankings coming, and it's just a great time to subscribe, so make sure you do it. But without further ado, I'm going to go ahead and jump into my predictions. I will leave timestamps for this and chapters so that you can skip around to whichever genres you're interested in or that you prefer, that we don't have to watch the whole video. But yeah, that'll be there for you. And then in addition to that, I'm not going to go too deeply in detail on what all these books are about, but I will leave a link to the Goodreads page for each of the books in the description below so that you can read the full description if you're interested. I will cover some little bits of information that I feel are relevant as well and why I think that each book might be in the Book of the Month box, but that's really it. I'm not going to go too deeply because this video would be so long if I wanted to read every single book description and summary. So without further ado, let's go ahead and jump into the first genre. Alright, so let's go ahead and knock out mystery thrillers right away because like I said, this was actually the hardest genre to narrow down in my opinion because there are so many mystery and thrillers coming out in January. It is bonkers. And so these books that I have selected, I do think have a really good shot of being selected. That being said, I have quite a few honorable mentions down below, which I do think have a good chance. And some that I predicted last month are featured still, but some that I predicted last month are not featured. So let's get into them. First things first, I really do think that Reckless Girls by Rachel Hawkins has a really great chance of being selected for a couple of reasons. One, the description of this book just sounds really, really interesting. And then in addition to that, Rachel Hawkins has been featured before last year with her book, The Wife Upstairs. And that was a pretty popular release, so I can definitely see them wanting to bring her back. Really quick, let me read the brief description at the top of the summary on Goodreads. It says, from the New York Times bestselling author of The Wife Upstairs comes a deliciously wicked gothic suspense set on an isolated Pacific Island with a dark history for fans of Lucy Foley and Ruth Ware. So there you have it. I mean, it gives off Lucy Foley and Ruth Ware vibes, which both of those authors have been featured before in Book of the Month, and with Rachel Hawkins having been featured before as well, I really do think there's a good shot of it. The only thing that I'm a little trepidatious on is the fact that sometimes what they'll do in situations like this is they'll feature an author, and then for their next book, they'll go ahead and feature like a debut author or something like that instead, and they'll have you know, their new book by this author they featured before be listed as an add-on. So I think this one could possibly be an add-on, but it really could be a main pick as well. Reckless Girls is 320 pages long, which is the perfect length for a book of the month selection, since they really typically don't like to do books that are really long or really, really short. Sometimes they do some on the shorter end, but typically they don't go over like 500 pages on books. 320 is absolutely perfect. This book does release on January 4th, and so it is right on time for the January Book of the Month box. I did predict this one as possibly being in the December box, but I guess that was just a little bit too early, so I do think that this is the perfect time for this book to be listed. The second book that I wanted to talk to you guys about today is The Accomplice. This book is by Lisa Lutz. And yeah, I'm actually really, really excited about this book. Regardless of whether or not it is actually featured in Book of the Month, I will definitely be picking this one up because it seems right up my alley. The brief description on Goodreads says, everyone has the same questions about best friends Owen and Luna. What binds them together so tightly? Why weren't they ever a couple? And why do people around them keep turning up dead? In this riveting novel from the New York Times bestselling author of The Passenger, every answer raises a new, more chilling question. So that just sounds really great to me. I really like kind of like the two characters at the center of it, and just all the questions that are being raised. I feel like it's just gonna be really mysterious, and it definitely vibes with me. In addition to that, this book is 368 pages, so it's a good length again, and it does release January 25th. So it does come out late January, like I said, but I don't think that that will necessarily keep it from being selected. They do early picks all the time and early releases, and so I really do think this one has a shot of being selected. Next is a book that was not on my radar at all until I started doing research for this video. The other ones of the thrillers I had heard about and seen some buzz for, but this one I hadn't heard about at all somehow, and it is called Notes on an Execution by Danya Kafka. Now, like I said, I hadn't heard about it before, but since I found this in the days leading up to me filming this, I feel like I'm seeing this book all over the place. It sounds really, really interesting. The short description on Goodreads says, in the tradition of Long Bright River and The Mars Room, a gripping and atmospheric work of literary suspense that deconstructs the story of a serial killer on death row, told primarily through the eyes of the woman in his life, from the best-selling author of Girl in Snow. So this sounds really unique. It sounds like a really good time. I am very interested in it. It also has a very high Goodreads score as of right now with 4.43. That being said, it only has 149 ratings, so that could definitely change. However, the reviews for this have been absolutely glowing. In addition to that, the fact that they mention Long Bright River, which has also been selected as a Book of the Month pick before, gives me a good feeling about it. And yeah, this just sounds really great. The page count on this is 272, so it's a little bit on the shorter side, but not too short. And then it does release on January 25th, but again, it could definitely be an early release. All right, moving on, we're gonna go ahead and jump into the next genre. Now with this one, last video I did a separate genre for contemporary and a separate one for literary fiction, but to be honest, I kind of struggle with like determining whether or not something is specifically contemporary or literary, because sometimes it can fit into both categories. So rather than doing like two shorter ones for each, I'm just gonna go ahead and mesh those genres and say that these can be applied to contemporary or literary dependent upon the book and the subject matter, and we'll just go from there. I also have some honorable mentions for this one in the description down below, so take a look there if you're interested. First book is The School for Good Mothers. Now this book has been on my radar for quite a while actually. The cover caught my attention when I first saw it. It is by Jessamine Chan, and it sounds super interesting. So the weird thing about this one is it is listed as literary fiction, but it is also sometimes listed as science fiction or like dystopian fiction, so keep that in mind if that's something that you're into or not into. The short description on Goodreads says, in this taut and explosive debut novel, one lapse in judgment lands a young mother in a government reform program where custody of her child hangs in the balance. Ooh, all the drama. Yeah, so this one sounds really interesting. Like I said, I really enjoy the cover of this. I think it's really well designed. But beyond that, this has been getting some pretty significant buzz and good reviews. The page count on this is 336, and the book does release on January 4th, so it has that perfect release date for the January Book of the Month box. But yeah, this one sounds like a good time. I think I will read this one regardless of whether or not it's selected, but I hope it is selected. All right, next up we have Fiona and Jane by Jean Chen Ho. Now this book has one of those classic like silhouettes of people kind of with the colors. It definitely feels like a very trendy cover vibe. And in addition to that, okay, so anytime I'm looking at like these Book of the Month picks, I always look to see whether or not there's a space that could be where like the little Book of the Month symbol is like in the top corner. And clearly here on this one, there is like a space like perfect for it. So like, obviously it's gonna be the choice, right? No, I'm just kidding. But this book sounds really, really interesting. The summary on Goodreads says a witty, warm, and irreverent book that traces the lives of two young Taiwanese American women as they navigate friendship, sexuality, identity, and heartbreak over 2 decades. So he said a lot of things in there that I definitely enjoy. I love friendships at the center of a book, and then in addition to that, I love it when we get to follow characters like over a pretty significant amount of time and really gather a lot of information about them and also witness a lot of character development. And the fact that this covers 20 years is pretty great on my end. And then in addition to that, this book does come in at 288 pages, so it's a nice short length. I am always interested to see like when a book covers that amount of time, but it's pretty short, just how it's handled. But the reviews for this have been absolutely exceptional. It has a 4.29 so far on Goodreads, and I am definitely interested to find out more. This book releases on January 4th, and it is a debut novel, so that is good to keep in mind as well, because they love selecting debut novels so that people can discover new authors on Book of the Month, and I think that is just wonderful. I love that they feature debut authors so often. I think it's great, and I think this would be an excellent selection for the literary/contemporary genre. And my last selection for the literary contemporary genre is Joan is Okay by Waiki Wong. I think that's how you say it. If I didn't say it correctly, I'm so sorry. But this book has been all over the place, I feel like. I saw the book cover for it like 6 months ago, and now I see reviews for it all the time on Instagram. I've seen it all over NetGalley. They're definitely promoting this book a lot, so I think there's a shot of it being featured. And then in addition to that, this author has had a previous book featured that is Chemistry. I haven't read that book or even heard of it, but I did see that it was featured at some point on Book of the Month, so that's really interesting. The quick description on Goodreads says, a witty, moving, piercingly insightful new novel about a marvelously complicated woman who can't be anyone but herself, from the award-winning author of Chemistry. Yeah, so like I said, this book has been getting a ton of buzz. I really like the simplicity of the cover, and you could definitely squeeze that little Book of the Month symbol in there if you wanted to. But yeah, this seems really interesting. I'm really excited about it, and I think that there is a good shot of it being featured. This book comes in at 224 pages, so it is pretty short, but it's still over the 200-page mark, so I think there's a good chance. They will feature like really short books sometimes, so it's not out of the question. And then it does come out January 18th. All right, next we are moving on to science fiction and fantasy. So there weren't like a ton of options for this one, but I do have, I think, 2 honorable mentions that I will leave in the description that I think are also really interesting and could be selected as well. But these are the 3 books that I think have a chance of being selected the most. First up, we have How High We Go in the Dark by Sequoia Nagamatsu. Now this book, I actually requested on NetGalley and got denied for, so that's a bummer. But I am super, super excited about getting to read this book. It is a science fiction story, and the short description on Goodreads says, follow a cast of intricately linked characters over hundreds of years as humanity struggles to rebuild itself in the aftermath of a climate plague. So it's definitely timely with the climate situation and a plague situation. But in addition to that, it just seems like a very, very, I don't know, masterfully crafted kind of story. I love it when you have like a lot of different characters and their stories are intricately woven together and things like that. I just find it to be so impressive in the way that authors connect characters in that way. And so I'm definitely drawn to this book. It is set in 2030, or at least it begins in 2030. So that's interesting as well, that it's in the future, but not like super in the future. This book does come in at 304 pages, which is kind of surprising for a science fiction book that seems to be so ambitious, but I'm really interested to see where the author takes it. In addition to that, it has really good ratings so far with a 4.23 on Goodreads, and yeah, it does release on January 18th, so regardless of whether or not it is selected, I will definitely be checking this one out soon. Next up, we have The Ivory Key, which is a YA fantasy novel. It is the start to a duology, and the cover just gives me like Book of the Month vibes, to be honest. Like, that's what first grabbed my attention. Before I even heard what it was about, I saw that and I was like, oh yeah, I could definitely see that being a Book of the Month. This book is a debut novel written by Akshaya Raman, but the short description on Goodreads says, magic, a prized resource, is the only thing between peace and war. When magic runs out, 4 estranged royal siblings must find a new source before their country is swallowed by invading forces, the first in an Indian-inspired duology. So I absolutely love that this is Indian-inspired. I think that's wonderful. And then in addition to that, I love sibling-focused stories. I love like sibling dynamics in books. I think that's so engaging and really interesting. And then I also like just kind of the way that magic is handled in this, the fact that it's like a limited resource and it's running out. I think that's a really interesting take on like a fantasy novel. This book does come in at 384 pages, and it does release on January 4th, so here's hoping it's a selection. My last sci-fi fantasy selection is Light Years from Home by Mike Chen. Now, Mike Chen actually did have another book featured in Book of the Month pretty recently. Actually, his book We Could Be Heroes was featured in 2021, I believe. It might have been 2020, but I think it was 2021. So yeah, he's had a pretty quick turnaround on that, but this book does release on January 25th, so it's definitely in the running for January. I believe We Could Be Heroes was actually I think it was an add-on, and so this would be interesting if it was made as a main selection, because usually it's the other way around. They'll do a main pick for somebody and then do an add-on, but it'd be interesting if they did it backwards this time. This book does come in at 352 pages. It is sci-fi, pretty clearly from the visual on the cover. There's a very tiny description of it on Goodreads at the top. It says, every family has issues, most can't blame them on extraterrestrials. So we have aliens involved, so that's pretty cool. It definitely seems really interesting, and I encourage you to check out the full description on Goodreads, link down below. All right, 2 more genres to go. Next up, we have historical fiction. So it was pretty hard to narrow down the historical fiction selection as well. There are a lot of interesting titles coming out in this genre in January, so definitely check those out in the description down below. But the first selection that I have for you is The Magnolia Palace by Fiona Davis. This book comes in at 368 pages, and it does release on January 25th. So, this book's description says, Fiona Davis, the New York Times bestselling author of The Lions of the Fifth Avenue, returns with a tantalizing novel about the secrets, betrayal, and murder within one of New York's most impressive Gilded Age mansions. So it definitely seems like it has a pretty good sense of ambiance, and definitely has a good sense of atmosphere that I'm into. I like the whole Gilded Age mansions mentioned, and New York setting is always really, enticing. But then beyond that, we've got interesting things like secrets, betrayal, and murder. So those are some pretty buzzy words that should grab your attention. I'm pretty interested in this one, and the Goodreads rating on it is a 4.40, so that is pretty impressive. So yeah, I think this one definitely has a good shot of being selected. The second book that I think could have a shot of being selected for the historical genre is The Saints of Swallow Hill by Donna Everhart. So this book has been getting quite a bit of buzz. I've seen it all over the place on Instagram, and a few times on YouTube actually. People have mentioned it on upcoming releases they're excited about, so that's pretty cool. This book is, like I said, by Donna Everhart, and the description on Goodreads says, Where the Crawdads Sing meets the Four Winds, as award-winning author Donna Everhart's latest novel immerses readers in its unique setting, the turpentine camps and pine forests of the American South during the Great Depression, for a captivating story of friendship, survival, and 3 vagabonds' intersecting lives. Oh, that sounds really, really good. It definitely does give off like the Four Winds vibes with the cover that you've got on this book, but beyond that, the story description, obviously like being set during the Great Depression, things like that gives off those kind of vibes. But this book sounds really interesting and really moving. I am very excited about this one. I think it has a good shot at being selected. Honestly, of the 3 that I've found, I think this is the one I'm most excited about. Whether or not it's selected, only time will tell. This book does come in at 352 pages, and it does release on January 25th. I'm noticing now that most of these books actually come out on January 25th, so that is a big day for buying new books. Huzzah. And lastly, for the historical fiction genre, I have Anatomy, a Love Story by Dana Schwartz. So this book I actually have had a NetGalley arc of for a while, but I have not read it. Who's surprised? Not me. But this book sounds really interesting. It definitely gives off a lot of different vibes. So it is listed as historical fiction, but it is also YA, and it gives off kind of some like mystery vibes, some like gothic vibes. And I'm definitely into it. So the description on Goodreads says, a gothic tale full of mystery and romance about a willful female surgeon, a resurrection man who sells bodies for a living, and the buried secrets they must uncover together. And it's set in Edinburgh in 1817. So that's pretty cool. Like I said, this book is a YA book, so if you're not into YA, you may want to skip it, but the cover's really nice. I think it would be a really great selection. And then in addition to that, Dana Schwartz has been featured before. Her book And We're Off was featured at some point in Book of the Month. It is currently sold out on Book of the Month. I'm not sure if they'll bring it back if it's selected. I doubt it. But maybe they will. Who knows? I can't say. I don't work at Book of the Month. This book comes in at 352 pages and comes out January 18th. And lastly, we have the romance genre. So like I said in my last video, I don't really read a lot of romance. I pick one up every now and then if it seems really interesting. That being said, I did quite a bit of research, and there are a lot of romance books coming out in January, so take a look at those if you're interested down below. However, these are the 3 that I think have the biggest chance of being selected. First up, we have Reminders of Him by Colleen Hoover. I did feature this book last month, but I said in my predictions video last month that I thought there was a better chance that this one would be featured in January over December, just because I didn't think that they would early release it that early. Now, if it was to come out in the January Book of the Month box, it would still be a little bit early because Reminders of Him doesn't release until January 18th. However, I do think there's a pretty good chance. My reason for saying that is they really are pushing Colleen Hoover quite a bit right now. Her book, It Ends With Us, was an add-on for November, but it wasn't featured in that add-on selection like email and marketing. However, it was available, and now it is featured in the marketing for December. So I really do feel like they're trying to make it available to people, her works and things like that, and build kind of the buzz around that on Book of the Month, so that in January, when they release Reminders of Him as a selection, people will be more inclined to get it. The short description for this one on Goodreads says, a troubled young mother yearns for a shot at redemption in this heartbreaking yet hopeful story from #1 New York Times bestselling author Colleen Hoover. This has a shocking 4.73 on Goodreads right now, so that is pretty incredible. And it has not a lot of ratings, but it does have over 200, so that's pretty significant. This book comes in at 335 pages, and like I said, it comes out on January 18th. What they've been doing lately also is sometimes for like buzzy releases, they'll wait until the book is actually published to put it on as an add-on. So if it's not selected as a main pick, I do think there's still a good chance that they could release it as an add-on on the release date. However, I don't know, I think they're more likely to pick it as a January pick than to do that, in my personal opinion. Then we have How to Love Your Neighbor by Sophie Sullivan. This book comes in at 352 pages and also releases on January 18th. Now this one doesn't have as significantly strong Goodreads scores, so that's a little bit concerning, and it does have 421 ratings already with a 3.64, so I don't know, but it does give me the vibes that Book of the Month has been going for with the romance books lately, so there is a chance. The Goodreads description says, Enemies to Lovers meets HGTV in this frothy, effervescent romantic comedy from Sophie Sullivan, author of 10 Rules for Faking It. I don't know that I've ever heard a book be described as frothy before, so that's interesting. But yeah, this book does come in at 352 pages, and it does release on January 18th. We'll see if it's selected. And the last book in the romance category that I have selected is one that's been getting quite a bit of buzz lately. It is called Weather Girl, and it is by Rachel Lynn Solomon. This book comes in at 352 pages, and it releases on January 11th. The Goodreads score is pretty high for this one, honestly. Not as high as the Colleen Hoover book, but I mean, Colleen Hoover. The Goodreads description says, a TV meteorologist and a sports reporter scheme to reunite their divorced bosses with unforecasted results in the charming romantic comedy from the author of The X Talk. So this book does have a lot of buzz. The description of it sounds really interesting, and I could see it being selected for Book of the Month. And honestly, I think it has a better chance of being selected than the Colleen Hoover book. I think people would be happier with the Colleen Hoover book. However, I think this one is probably the safer bet, to be honest. So those are all of the books that I have chosen as predictions for the January Book of the Month box. However, I did want to quickly make my official predictions for what I think and hope will be the selection for the January box. So I'm gonna do this on the fly because honestly, there are a lot of good books. There are a lot of books that could be selected, and I wouldn't really be surprised at any of these, and I wouldn't be surprised at any of the other like honorable mentions that I found as well. Like I said, there are just so many great options. However, my predictions are as follows. For mystery thriller, I'm gonna go ahead and say Reckless Girls by Rachel Hawkins. It feels like a shoo-in. I really think that it will be selected. For contemporary / literary fiction, I think I'm gonna go with Fiona and Jane. I don't know why, honestly. That one's actually probably the hardest to decide for me because all 3 of the ones I selected I feel like have a really good shot, but I think I'm gonna go with Fiona and Jane. For science fiction and fantasy, if there is one of those featured this month, I think it's gonna be How High We Go in the Dark. I just think it has a lot of things going for it that Book of the Month looks for. For historical fiction, I'm gonna go ahead and guess The Saints of Swallow Hill. I'm pretty confident with that one, actually. For romance, I'm gonna go ahead and go with Reminders of Him by Colleen Hoover, just because I'm asking myself, why did they include It Ends With Us as an add-on so randomly when this book came out years ago? Yeah, there's a lot of buzz around it, but why now? And it only makes sense with her having a new book coming out that they would do that now. So yeah, those are my official predictions. Let me know down below what your official predictions are, or if there are any of these books that sound particularly interesting to you. I would love to chat with you guys about these books. Make sure you keep an eye on my channel though. I would honestly go ahead and hit that notification bell because I have so many exciting videos coming out. In addition to other Book of the Month videos, I have lots of year-end lists, and speaking of Book of the Month videos, I am working on a reading vlog right now where I read all 5 of the top Book of the Year nominees, which Book of the Month announced recently. So very excited about that because I haven't read any of those. But thank you guys so much for watching this video. I hope that you enjoyed. Cannot wait to discuss these books with you guys, as well as find out what the actual January Book of the Month books are. I will be posting a deep dive of those when they come out, so keep an eye out for that as well. But thank you guys so much for watching, and I will see you in the next video. Bye!